Hello everyone, good morning. I'm Tushar. Today I'm going to be presenting our paper, SoK, All You Need to Know About On-Device ML Model Extraction, the Gap Between Research and Practice. In past few years, we have seen the IoT devices have increasingly adopted on-device ML. This offers several benefits like stronger user privacy, real-time analysis, and better user experience. Overall, these capabilities make these devices more autonomous and reliable. However, this also brings certain security challenges where the adversary may attempt to extract the model, causing the model extraction attack or model stealing attack. This could lead to both financial and security implications. Like, for example, from the security perspective, these extracted model can be used by the attacker to carry out further malicious activities, which could cause some privacy issues as well. In defending these attacks, defense have explored various techniques like encryption or execution of ML tasks in the secured hardware, data transformation, or have adopted various algorithm-based protection techniques. Though there are very much defense techniques, but still we see that these existing techniques still remain somewhat fragmented and ad hoc. With the rise in the ML, we see that there are lack of comprehensive understanding for the existing model extraction attacks and their defense, which creates a gap for the development of more robust security techniques. In our paper, we have provided a framework that categorizes the existing model extraction attacks and their defense based on different threat levels. In the coming few slides, we're going to be discussing the different threat categories from the attacker's perspective and then the defender's perspective. The first threat category is the app-based attacks. Here, the attacker has ability to access the application package and it downloads it and decompiles it to get the model in the plain text format. To defend these attacks, defense uses techniques like encryption or obfuscation to prevent the extractions. Talking about the next category, we have device-based attacks. Here, the attacker has access to the IoT device and the memory region. Now, it uses some vulnerable application to load the model or waits for the model to load in the memory. And once it's loaded, it gets the model in the plain text format. To defend these attacks, defense uses technique like secured hardware like the TE environment. Talking about the next threat model is the communication-based attacks. Here, the attacker can sniff the communication between different memory regions and tries to recover data like the application runtime data, the power, or the memory access data, or the electromagnetic data. And based on that data, it tries to recover either the partial model or sometimes the entire model. To defend these attacks, defense uses techniques like data randomization or obfuscates the sensitive information from the model. Talking about the next threat model, we have the model-based attacks. Here, the attacker has ability to send the input queries to the model and observes the output results. And based on those results, it fine-tunes the data and tries to train the student model. To defend these attacks, defense uses the techniques like data obfuscation or differential privacy to ultimately increase the attacker's effort to train the student model. All in all, we have these major threat categories, and so far we found that there are more than 50 existing work based on those categories. This table here summarizes the total number of model extraction attacks based on the targets, the method they were using, and the framework they were exploiting. We have a similar table for the total number of defense projects as well, and we have briefly described these projects in our paper. From the previous two tables, we see that the model extraction attack typically targets the architecture, the weights, the functionality, and lastly, the whole model and its layer. We also see that the most common targeted ML frameworks were the TensorFlow, the PyTorch, and the general framework. And the attacker here uses the attack techniques like the decompilation, the memory access, the cache or timing attacks, and lastly, the black box attack. Similarly, for the defense, we see that the common attack target for the defense projects were the architecture, the weights, the model functionality, and lastly, the whole model and its layer. Again, we here see the similar trend. The most exploited ML frameworks were the TensorFlow and PyTorch. To defend these model extractions, the defense have adopted techniques like encryption, obfuscation, the TE environment, model data transformation, providing the misinformation to the outputs. For the evaluation, we majorly had three research questions. First was to check the reproducibility, meaning all those projects that were open source, can they be practically be replicated? Next was to check the effectiveness of those projects with the real-world applications. And lastly, we have discussed the computation complexity and the power consumption involved while attacking or defending these projects. Our findings for the reproducibility reveals that the existing work has explored not many communication-based attacks and their corresponding defense. From these two bar graphs, we also see that most of the projects that were open source were reproducible as well. And lastly, we have more number of defense projects than the attack ones. For the evaluation, to check the effectiveness of the attacks, we gathered around 16,500 model files from 210K APKs, and after hashing and deduplication, we were having 3,000 unique model files. Our findings for the app-based attacks reveals that the success rate of this attack is constantly increasing over the years, which means that still most of the models that are deployed in the APKs are vulnerable to these very simple attacks. When we carried out the investigation for the device-based attacks, we see that the real-world model fails due to the app instrumentation issue. Also, it was very hard to find the start and the end point of the model in the memory. When we tested the communication-based attacks, we found that, again, there were issues with the log incompatibility when we loaded the real-world model. And also, it requires retraining per device. Lastly, when we tested the model-based attacks, we see similar issues. The real-world model have some issues with the model formatting. Lastly, we also see that all these threat models, they demand high computational resources to have the better model inference or extraction results. Also, their effectiveness is heavily dependent on the data sets, nature of their data sets. Our finding for the defense projects were when we tested the app-based defenses, we see that its effectiveness is very limited, as attacker can use several other advanced attack techniques like the device-based attacks to carry on its prime objective. When we carried out the investigation for the device-based and the communication-based defenses, we see that the models like MobileNet and LX were successfully transformed, but there was significant drop in the defense accuracy, and also there were issues with the hardware scalability. Lastly, when we tested the model-based defenses, we see that though there was a less drop in the defender's model accuracy, but both the projects we tested so far were limited to the PyTorch model, and again, there were a few issues with the model, with the scalability with the real-world applications. Discussing the computational complexity of these projects, though it's worth acknowledging here that there are a lot of factors that actually affects the computation of this project, but in case of Deep Sniffer, we see that the key factor here is the kernel size, the model sequence, and the search algorithm. Similarly, for the projects like MLDoctor, the computational complexity a lot more depends on the number of queries, the network size, and the training effort to train the student model. Talking about the defense projects like AES, the complexity is affected by the size of the model, the number of rounds the encryption is being applied. So far, we have monitored the power in the real time for these projects, and we see that the power demand also increases significantly once the attack or defense is being applied. However, in case like of AES, the power demand was still a little bit lower than the rest of the projects. Lastly, I would like to say that we have open source our evaluation process whole and the projects we tested so far with the real-world applications, and we encourage everyone to carry out the further investigation. And with this, I come to end to my presentation. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm up for questions now.